Discover how one waitress silenced a billionaire with an inspiring 5-word Arabic response. Sarah wiped down the counter for what felt like the 1000th time that day, the clinking of plates and chatter of customers swirling around her like an intoxicating mix of comfort and chaos. Maple Street Diner, with its faded booths and neon lights, was a haven for truck drivers, families, and regulars seeking solace in greasy fries and home-brewed coffee. But for Sarah, it was more than just a job, it was her lifeline. At 30, juggling a late-night shift while raising Mia and Jake felt like balancing a tightrope over a chasm. Every smile she painted on her face felt heavy with unspoken worries, bills that piled up, the relentless pressure of aloneness, and the fear of failure. Everything shifted the moment Mark walked in. He oozed arrogance, wrapped in designer fabric, expecting to be treated like royalty in this modest establishment. The jingle of the door made heads turn, and he strode to a corner booth with an air of entitlement. Sarah's heart sank at the sight. She knew people like him, those who never saw the invisible struggles of someone like her. As she approached to take his order, her hands trembled slightly as if by their own will. In the midst of the familiar routine, a fleeting thought flickered. She wished for his life even for just a moment. Just as she poured his coffee, focused on getting the order right, the cup toppled over. A surge of hot liquid splashed onto his polished shoes. Her breath hitched. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, stifling despair. But there was no mercy in his eyes. "Watch where you're pouring," he snapped, the contempt dripping from his voice. The diner fell quiet, a heavy blanket of tension suffocating the air. Suddenly, a surge of fire ignited within her. Years of being overlooked bubbled to the surface. She found herself retorting in Arabic, a phrase rich with the weight of her culture that echoed her grandmother's wisdom. "Don't think you're above everyone." The words hung in the air like a sharp blade, slicing through the atmosphere. The diner held its breath. Was that defiance truly hers? Or just a rash reaction born of desperation? Mark's eyes widened, his mouth slightly agape, as if the very essence of superiority was being challenged for the first time. Sarah's heart raced, her mind spinning with echoes of her own fight for dignity. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. The tension grew thicker as Sarah stood there, trembling but resolute. Each mix of emotions crashed over her like waves: fear for what she said, determination that it mattered, anxiety about the way this could turn out. Mark's arrogance seemed to waver as he tried to process her challenge. It was just a word, but it felt monumental, a fracture in the barriers of privilege and hardship. But the psychological weight was heavy. Could she really confront him? Each patron's gaze felt like a spotlight, their stories intertwining with her struggle, pressing the urgency of the moment. Doubt began gnawing at her. Would this moment be a breakthrough or just another instance of someone looking through her? As silence enveloped them, she realized her moment was slipping away. What if her courage was misplaced? Yet, amidst that whirlpool of conflicting feelings, she had ignited something larger, something that could either elevate her or drown her deeper in despair. The diner waited, breathless, caught between two worlds, both defined by their struggles. In that charged silence, Sarah's fate hung. In the balance. The silence seemed to stretch indefinitely, each second drumming in Sarah's ears like the ticking of a clock, counting down to an unmarked fate. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, a delicate blend of adrenaline and embarrassment coursing through her veins. Mark's gaze was heavy, his reaction a storm that she couldn't quite predict. As the seconds dragged, a flicker of defiance ignited again, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished by the weight of doubt. It dawned on Sarah that her words were not just a reaction but a declaration. For too long, she had absorbed the judgments of wealthy patrons, all while burying her own worth beneath their scorn. She wasn't just a waitress serving meals, she was a component in the vibrant tapestry of the diner, essential yet overlooked. "Are you finished?" Mark's cutting tone sliced through her introspection as he wiped his shoes with a napkin, his arrogance surfacing once more. The spark within her grew brighter. She had a chance to turn this moment into something transformative. "What I said was true," she found herself blurting out, surprising even herself. "You treat people like they don't matter. I'm not afraid of you." Her voice quivered, not from fear, but from an emerging strength she hadn't known existed. It felt raw, exposed yet liberating. Several patrons looked up, expressions ranging from shock to amusement. This was more than just a moment of personal confrontation, it was a communal turning point. Each witness had endured their own silent battles, and Sarah's challenge mirrored their unyielding struggles against the invisible chains of their lives. Mark leaned back, eyebrow raised, as though trying to decipher the soft-spoken waitress who dared to stand against a perceived giant. "You think those words resonate?" His laughter was harsh, yet there was a shift in the air, an underlying thread of curiosity weaved through his disdain. "Maybe it's time they did," Sarah replied, standing taller, the weight of her decision reshaping her identity. Maybe this wasn't just about Mark, it was about her. It was about redefining her story among those who overlooked her day after day. Mark gathered himself, still exuding confidence but lacking the prior certainty. "This isn't over," he snapped, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. It surprised her he wasn't accustomed to being challenged. As he rose to leave, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline bypassing the fears. She had stood her ground, she had taken a step toward reclaiming her narrative. Returning to her duties, she wiped the table with a newfound resolve. Heat coursed through her like a caffeine jolt, a reminder of her tenacity. Thoughts whirled. What if this was just the beginning? Perhaps it would provoke not just change in her small world but ripple out beyond Maple Street Diner's faded walls. She felt a need to harness this unexpected surge of empowerment. But as the night wore on and the diner's chatter resumed, doubt crept back in. What would this confrontation mean for her future? Would Mark retaliate? Facing her reflection in the glass of the diner windows, she saw more than the worn-out waitress who had always been afraid. She recognized a person capable of standing up, pushing boundaries, and demanding respect. Yet she also knew this was merely the first skirmish in a much larger battle. The question loomed in the air, thick with possibility. Could she leverage this moment into a longer-term change, not just for herself, but for a community that often felt invisible? The opportunity to step into a larger world awaited her, teetering on the edge of revelation. But would she embrace it? The moment of truth was approaching, and with it came a new uncertainty. How far was she prepared to go to challenge the things that had always held her back? In a shadowed corner of the diner, the next chapter of her journey beckoned, one filled with new risks, decisions, and a pathway to a life that could alter everything she once thought possible. The next morning, Sarah stood by the diner window, its panes still foggy from the cold dawn air. The flash of accomplishment from last night lingered, but it was accompanied by a growing knot of concern in her stomach. Mark's dismissal rumbled in her mind like distant thunder. What did this isn't over really mean for her? As her colleagues poured in, the usual banter echoed around her, but Sarah was already drafting a new narrative in her mind, one where she wasn't just a waitress but a catalyst for change. She decided she had to do more than just survive this moment. She needed to thrive. Sifting through her thoughts, she considered how she might leverage her bold stand into a sea change not only in her life but the lives of those around her. Shifting her focus back to the busy morning ahead, she dove into her work, but each cup of coffee served and every plate carried felt charged with potential. She began to interact with her customers differently, greeting them with warmth that felt foreign but electrifying. The patrons who sat in her section included students, retirees, and demanding families, each wrapped in their own worlds. Yet, she pressed on, sprinkling kindness into her exchanges, sharing personal stories and asking thoughtful questions. A familiar face appeared, the older gentleman who came in every Wednesday, Mr. Jenkins. He had always been a kind soul, offering gentle smiles and quiet words about the world he remembered. Today, however, Sarah approached him with a new determination. "Mr. Jenkins, what changes have you seen in this town over the years? What do you believe people should know?" His eyes sparkled with surprise and then delight as he shared tales both captivating and enlightening. In those moments, she began to realize how often people were just waiting to be seen. Their burdens turned lighter through human connection, and in turn, her own sense of purpose intensified. It was a delicate dance of mutual recognition, both humbled and empowered by the exchange. Over the following days, Sarah continued this practice, coaxing stories from customers and sharing her own, one spark lighting another. Conversations about the diner flowed into discussions about dreams, aspirations, and the courage to chase them. She imagined a space where discomfort became dialogue, and barriers dissolved in the warmth of understanding, yet, the specter of Mark loomed large, a nagging presence in her growth. The more she found herself blossoming in courage, the more acutely aware she was of her adversary. She began plotting ways to confront him again, not with hostility but confidence, a direct invitation to a far larger discussion about respect, equality, and recognition. The community that had felt distant felt nearer now. She could sense their lens shifting. She was part of something greater than herself. With every interaction, she was carved anew, paving her way toward a deeper purpose. She even scribbled her aspirations into a notebook beside her bed, incremental goals that seemed like stepping stones toward a more significant change. But there were evenings when she caught the reflection of doubt, a whisper reminding her of her place in the hierarchy behind the counter. Could a waitress really challenge the status quo? Could she reshape her own reality without losing what remained of her old life? As the week progressed, she found herself at a crossroads, facing the escalating stakes of her decisions. With Mark's presence at the diner once again imminent, she felt the atmosphere crackling with tension. What would she say? How far was she willing to go to defend her narrative? In a moment of clarity, Sarah resolved to confront Mark once more, but this time on her terms. It would no longer be about merely reacting, it would be an assertive push against the very foundation he embodied. She was ready to embrace the challenge, but would her resolve hold firm when faced with his undaunted power? As she prepped for the shift, the question hung thick in the air: was she ready to step from the shadows into a moment that could redefine not only her life but ripple through the experiences of those around her? The impending confrontation loomed as the clock ticked down to what could be a life-altering encounter. The diner buzzed with the familiar clatter of plates and the hiss of the coffee machine as Sarah slipped into her routine, each action laced with an undercurrent of anticipation. As she cantered between tables, taking orders with confidence, her heart echoed a steady rhythm of purpose. Today was not just another day at work, it felt seismic, charged with the electricity of what lay ahead. Mark's impending arrival hovered over her like a storm cloud. The thought of facing him again, this time consciously crafted to reclaim her narrative, sparked equal parts dread and exhilaration. She replayed the thought again and again as she delivered coffee and exchanged pleasantries. Images of her previous encounter loomed in her mind like ghosts, reminders of words left unspoken. Those 5 words, sharp, precise, a bullet of clarity that seemed to linger in the air long after their exchange. Could she turn that moment into something transformative? When Mark strode through the diner door, his presence immediately redirected the currents of energy in the room. He was imposing, every step a testament to his confidence, yet beneath her palpable anxiety, a flicker of courage ignited. As he settled into an empty booth, she could feel her resolve solidifying. She clenched and unclenched her hands, the stranger's gestures of preparation for battle. The minutes dragged, and Sarah forced herself to breathe, pacing her thoughts until they honed into clarity. She had spent the last week exploring the stories of her customers. They had confided their dreams and fears, and through their experiences, she uncovered her own growing strength. These exchanges illuminated her mission. She wasn't just a waitress but a conduit for dreams, a voice that could resonate beyond her own sphere. Finally, taking a deep breath, she smoothed her apron, set her shoulders, and approached Mark's booth. His eyes lifted from the menu, a flicker of surprise crossing his face as she greeted him. She felt unsteady, the gravity of the moment almost overwhelming, but something shifted inside her. He was not merely her boss, he was the embodiment of everything she was challenging, everything she was redefining. "Mark," she said, her voice steady, "we need to talk." The directness in her tone caught her off guard, but she pressed on. "Your comments last week were disrespectful, and they don't represent the values our diner stands for. I may be just a waitress, but I have something to say." Mark leaned back, steepling his fingers, a smirk playing on his lips. "What do you think you can say that I haven't already heard?" His dismissal stung, but Sarah tightened her grip on her resolve. "She wasn't here to be belittled." With a surge of adrenaline, she continued, "People here are more than just numbers or tables. They come for connection, for authenticity. This place is our community, part of who we are, and it deserves better." His expression shifted, a mixture of disdain and intrigue flickering in his eyes. Interesting perspective for a waitress. The challenge was clear, he didn't take her seriously. But as she met his gaze, she felt emboldened by all the stories she had gathered, voices she had amplified. "If all I have is this role, I'll excel at it. And maybe you'll learn what it means to listen." With that, she turned, a rush of warmth energizing her as she walked away. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but excitement. Was this the moment that would reshape how they interacted from then? Yet, doubt crept back in. Would Mark respond constructively, or would her words become fuel for his retaliation? The conflict loomed just as sharply as before, but as she moved back to the counter, a vision unfolded. Suddenly, Sarah could see beyond the diner walls and into a future she could influence. That night, after the last customers departed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the precipice of change she stood upon. She wanted to delve deeper into how she could empower herself and others. But there was a storm brewing with Mark, and his unpredictable nature could crumble her emerging foundation. As she closed her notebook, a new resolve formed. She would map out potential strategies to strengthen not just her stance but her burgeoning community influence. The thought ignited something within, how to rally support and perhaps challenge Mark in the wider landscape of their world. She was no longer just planning a conversation, she was preparing for a battle of ideals. With the clock ticking toward the next confrontation, she felt invigorated. As she stood at the rim of her new existence, the whisper of doubt faded. Would she become a thorn in Mark's side or a beacon of change? The answer hung in the air, both exhilarating and terrifying. The next day promised another opportunity, another challenge. But as the sun rose, she recognized what lay ahead could define her. Would she be able to shift the narrative, or would she remain ensnared in the very chains she sought to break? The question loomed as she stepped into the diner, the stage set for a showdown that could compel both transformation and truth. The morning rush hit the diner like a wave, and Sarah slid back into the familiar rhythm. Each customer brought a new opportunity, a renewed purpose. She was no longer merely a waitress, but a voice in a conversation that seemed to ripple beyond the confines of the diner. As she deftly navigated between tables, taking orders with an air of quiet confidence, her thoughts swirled around the confrontation with Mark that lay ahead. He hadn't spoken to her since their last exchange, and the silence hung heavy, crackling with unacknowledged tension. This unnerved her, fired her determination instead of quenching it. How could she ignite a conversation of depth, challenge his perspective, and make her stance resonate with the rest of the staff? The diner wasn't just a workplace, it was a microcosm that reflected larger societal dynamics. If she succeeded here, she could transcend her role. Her eyes flitted to the other employees, wary and waiting for her lead. In those moments, a realization unfolded within her. She had gathered strength not from her position, but from the stories shared across the counter, fragile ambitions and hidden despairs that were finer than mere words. Each customer was a layer of skin on a larger narrative, and she had become their chronicler. Could she channel that collective spirit as a tool to stoke change? As noon approached, the steady hum of conversation crescendoed into a familiar chaos. Sarah took a moment to collect her thoughts, mentally sifting through potential approaches to engage Mark. She didn't want to approach him with anger, rather, she wished to confront him with clarity and conviction. Her mind danced between ideas, contemplating what might sway him. The diner was alive with energy, but it was her spirit she needed to embolden first. With her next round of coffee orders in hand, she brushed past Mark's booth, deliberately making eye contact. She noticed a hard edge flicker across his face, quickly masked by indifference. It would be easy to shrink in that moment, but Sarah dug deeper, drawing energy from all the stories she had gathered. Taking a breath, she approached. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the doubts crashing inside her. Mark looked up, amusement flowing through his expression. "Didn't he think you'd be so eager for more?" "Consider it part of my job to speak honestly," she replied, finding strength in her resolve. "I think it's important to redefine what our diner represents, and that starts with understanding. You may dismiss this as just a job, but for many of us," she gestured around, "it's a home." His eyes narrowed, defenses rising. "Home? You think people really care about that?" "Actually, they do. I've seen how a simple conversation over coffee can brighten someone's day. There's value in those connections." Her pulse quickened, a tide of adrenaline coursing through her. Each word felt like a step toward dismantling the wall between them. Mark leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're asking for me to agree with feelings?" "Not feelings, Mark. Acknowledgement." The tremor of her conviction propelled her further. "This isn't about agreeing. It's about understanding that every person who walks through that door carries a life, a narrative worth hearing." He raised an eyebrow, skepticism etching his features. Perfect. She needed challenge. Interesting note from someone who serves them food. "Is it so strange that I care?" Her voice crackled with emboldened energy. "If I can step beyond my role, so can you. You have influence and power. Why not use it to uplift this space we share?" Mark's expression softened for just a heartbeat, a flicker of consideration that made her heart leap. Yet the moment passed, and he straightened, the defenses flickering back into place. "Illusions of grandeur often lead to disappointment, Sarah." Disappointment. The word settled uncomfortably in the marrow of her bones, awakening a defiant pulse. "Then reshape what you see," she shot back. "Be the disappointment you fear, or break free from it. You can't hide behind your titles forever." A moment of silence. Stretched, fraught with unbridled tension. As customers streamed in and out, oblivious to the verbal clash, Sarah stood her ground, heart racing. She recognized that this dance between them could either sink her spirit or elevate it. She chose the latter. This was no longer simply a battle against Mark, it was an awakening of her identity, but as the minute hand ticked closer to the confrontation looming ahead, a question loomed larger. Was she prepared for the consequences of her words? Would she find allies among her colleagues, or would she stand alone advocating for a change within them all? The diner seemed to hold its breath, and with it, Sarah prepared for the moment that could change everything. Could she emerge from this showdown transformed, or would she find herself fading back into invisibility? As the shifting tides of the diner's chaos swirled around her, Sarah was acutely aware of the weight of her concluding words. The adrenaline sustained her, yet beneath that surface she felt the gnawing uncertainty of what had just transpired. Mark's gaze was a riddle still clouded, maybe set in a stubborn disbelief, but she sensed the slightest crack in his armor. Would he keep that door closed, or had she sown the seeds of doubt that could open a pathway? The harmony of clinking dishes and lively chatter faded into white noise, allowing her to discern the rhythm of her own heartbeat. It was a metronome of resolve and fear rolled into one, dictating the pace of her next move. Had she miscalculated? Just then, her fellow waitress, Julie, caught her eye from across the diner, a silent question reflected in her expression. Sarah understood. She recognized that Julie was one of the many spirits here seeking a glimmer of change but was unsure of how to join the conversation. Acknowledging that connection became an instinctive push forward. With purpose, Sarah made her way towards Julie, mindful of the growing heat in her chest. "Did you see that?" she asked, lowering her voice to avoid alerting Mark. "I think there is something more to him than meets the eye." "What do you mean?" Julie leaned in, eyes wide. "He gives off such a tough exterior. Exactly. Maybe he's just as tired of the same old routine as we are. Or at least, he should be. Sarah straightened her posture, allowing the conviction to fill her frame. But that won't happen unless we stand up and speak our truths. Julie nodded slowly, contemplating Sarah's fervor for change. Think it's worth it? He just seems like a hard case. Breaking hard cases doesn't happen overnight. It takes persistence. If I can acknowledge the humanity in our customers, why can't I do the same with Mark? Sarah was surprised to hear her own words. They echoed a sentiment she had fought to embrace herself. If we want to redefine what this place represents, it starts with us standing firm. We are more than just servers. We are voices worth hearing. Just then, a customer waved frantically, and they both diverted their attention, but Sarah didn't allow the temporary distraction to sideline her momentum. She was beginning to understand that leadership doesn't always have to come with a title or a position. It often stems from listening, sharing, and preparing the soil for others to feel bold enough to plant their seeds. Each cup she filled and every smile she shared added volumes to the transformation she craved, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. With every interaction, she became a little more solidified in her mission. For every world-weary face she greeted, the weight of their stories anchored her. She recognized the privilege in those moments, the collective strength they could wield if united. As the din of the busy diner continued, Sarah's thoughts sharpened. She would need the insights and narratives of her colleagues if she truly intended to bring change. We can do this together, she said to Julie with determination. But it's more than just my voice. We need a chorus. Julie's face lit up, tentative excitement bubbling forth. What do you envision? We need a meeting, a moment where we all can speak freely, share what this diner means to us, figure out our goals together. If we're all part of this, it won't just be my words echoing through the halls. It could be our collective story. Sarah felt the shift in her core, the tether to purpose intertwining with ambition. She looked up at the wall clock, noticing the minute hand now resting closer to the afternoon rush. Leaning closer to Julie, she whispered, "We have to seize this moment. I'll talk to everyone before our next shift. If Mark sees the fire in our beliefs, he'll have no choice but to pay attention." As the vibrant spark of possibility ignited in her chest, Sarah knew that this wasn't just about confronting Mark anymore, it was about igniting a dialogue that could change the very narrative under which they lived. But what? If their convictions ignited a fire he wasn't ready to face, no longer was it merely about her, it was about the fabric of the diner itself, and she was resolutely stitching it into something greater. With newfound clarity, Sarah braced herself, for the challenge awaiting them all was not merely institutional, it was deeply personal. Could she galvanize the team around her without fracturing the fragile balance of their roles? Would they find the courage to speak out together, or would the shadows of doubt continue to hide them? As a new wave of customers flooded in, marking the next rush, Sarah inhaled, preparing for the pivotal conversations ahead. Would they rise to the occasion, or would she find herself standing alone amidst the crowd? The afternoon rush enveloped the diner with an unrelenting pace, the clatter of plates and the hiss of the grill forming a backdrop to Sarah's determined thoughts. Every order she took and every interaction she had became a thread in the tapestry of the change she sought. She could feel her confidence blooming as she moved through the chaos, her mind fixated on the upcoming conversations that would either turn the tide or leave her adrift. Glancing over at Julie, who was deftly managing a large table in the corner, Sarah felt a sudden pang of anxiety. What if her colleagues dismissed her ideas? What if Mark met them with the same stubborn silence she'd encountered before? Still, she brushed the doubts away, reminding herself that every great movement begins with a single voice. She was determined to be that voice. "Hey, could you cover for me in 10?" she asked Julie, her eyes steady with both urgency and resolve. "Of course," Julie replied, giving her a reassuring grin. With several deep breaths, Sarah approached the small break room. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her stomach, but she pushed through, reminding herself of the commitment she made not only to herself but to everyone around her. The moment she stepped inside, she was greeted by familiar faces, her coworkers who, like her, juggled their daily lives while yearning for something more. "Can we talk?" she began, her voice steady yet filled with a spark of eagerness. "I have an idea about how we can really reshape what this diner represents." Their expressions ranged from curiously intrigued to subtly skeptical, and Sarah felt each gaze weigh heavily. "I think we all know that something's off here," she continued bravely, "and we're the only ones who can shift our narrative. We're not just waiting tables, we create experiences." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, and with it came a rush of confidence that reverberated in Sarah's chest. This was the moment she'd been working towards, stepping into her vision and sharing it. "Let us hold a meeting," she proposed, her enthusiasm unfurling. "We can share what this place means to us and how we want it to evolve. If we all speak up together, our shared voices can't be ignored." One of the newer waitresses piped in, "But, what about Mark? If he doesn't like it?" Sarah quickly anticipated the concerns. "That's why we need to unite. If we position ourselves not just as employees but as invested contributors, we create a new dynamic. We can show Mark how our collective equity could improve not only the diner but his bottom line." The tension in the room began to thaw, with the weight of hesitations lifting slightly as more colleagues chimed in with their own stories and experiences. Each personal anecdote added layers to their collective narrative, the storytelling weaving itself further into a tapestry that could provoke curiosity in even the most jaded of customers. Yet as their conversation deepened, the specter of conflict loomed larger in Sarah's mind. What if Mark seized upon their boldness as a threat? Sarah's stomach churned, but she steadied herself. It was time to face that fear head-on, but also to acknowledge that change often comes with a price. Could she navigate this challenge without dismantling the relationships she'd cultivated? As their conversation wound down, Sarah could see a light flickering in her coworkers' eyes, anticipation taking root. They began to exchange ideas, and a sense of camaraderie filled the air, but her heart raced when Julie tentatively raised her voice again. "What if Mark doesn't listen? What if he pushes back?" "We'll adapt," Sarah asserted, her own resolve growing. "If he tries to shut us down, we need to be ready. Our worth is in our stories, each one rich with potential. So, we discover ways to frame our message that reach him." As they wrapped up the discussion, Sarah realized that embracing this collective courage was just the beginning. Each moment shared was a stepping stone, and the path ahead felt charged with both promise and peril. Could they really harness the power of their voices? Against a formidable wall of resistance, just then, the door jingled open, and Mark strolled in, dark suit contrasting sharply against the diner's bright decor. His presence loomed over them like an impending storm, and Sarah swallowed hard. She felt the atmosphere shift, their conversations suddenly felt fragile in the face of the authority he wielded. This was going to be a pivotal moment, she thought as she confronted the reality of facing him. The time had come to face the truth of their ambition against the looming doubts, to test whether the seeds of unity could indeed withstand the shadows of fear cast by Mark's indomitable presence. Would their resolve break through the barriers he erected, or would they find themselves overwhelmed and silenced? The heaviness in the air intensified as Mark stepped further into the cramped break room, his calculating gaze sweeping over the gathered employees. Sarah felt the immediate shift in energy, her heart pounding in time with the sharp inhale of her colleagues. This confrontation was no longer theoretical, it was unfolding in real time, each second stretching into an eternity. "What's going on here?" Mark's voice was neither loud nor aggressive, but it bore the weight of authority. It was a question, yet it felt more like an accusation. Sarah's instinct was to shrink back, but she stood her ground, recalling the energy shared in their earlier discussions. "Mark," she started, feeling the eyes of her coworkers on her, "we were just discussing how we can enhance our customer experience. We think it's essential for us, as a team, to contribute creatively to the diner." She could see the flicker of interest behind Mark's cool exterior, but he masked it quickly, his brow furrowing slightly, casting a shadow over her growing resolve. "Enhance? You mean to say you're unhappy with the current system in place?" "Yes, actually we are. We think there's more potential here, Sarah replied, her voice gaining strength. Somehow, this felt different from all the other times. This was no longer merely a plea for collaboration, it felt like a challenge, a declaration of her intent. Mark crossed his arms, leering at her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. And by we, I assume you mean the few of you gathered here. He gestured dismissively. What makes you think I should invest time in suggestions from my staff when there is a clear formula already working? Because we believe we have valuable insights, she pressed, daring to step closer. We're the ones on the ground, engaging with customers every day. Their experiences matter, and if we can create a deeper connection, it can only benefit the diner as a whole. A flicker of irritation crossed Mark's face. So, you think you understand my business better than I do? The direct confrontation felt like a jolt to Sarah, a stark reminder of the formidable barriers she had been trying to scale. I don't think I know better, she countered, her tone firm yet respectful. I just think we see things from a different perspective, and that perspective is critical to growth both for us and for you. The room went quiet. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly as he absorbed her words, and for the first time, confusion masked his disdain. He seemed to weigh the implications of this exchange, his expression shifting from disbelief to begrudged respect. As seconds passed, the silence morphed into a tableau of heartbeats. What would he do? Push back or engage? Sarah felt her colleagues hanging by the threads of her courage, ready for whatever came next. She knew the risks, the potential fallout if he chose to dismiss them. But there was something different in the air, something electric. Let us say I entertain your ideas, Mark finally said, his voice laced with sardonic curiosity. What do you suggest? Sarah took a breath, prepared to leap into her vision, but a nagging thought crept in. Was she treading into dangerous waters, wielding an uncertainty that could jeopardize not only her career but the bonds she'd formed with her team? We propose hosting a staff-led brainstorming session, a collaborative meeting where we can share our insights about customer engagement and service innovation, she said, driven by urgency. Mark tilted his head, intrigue crossing his face. And if I say no? Then we adapt, she replied, her conviction stealing her posture. But we're committed to trying for you, for us, and for the diner. If it fails, nothing is lost. If it succeeds, we'll forge something significant together. In that moment, Sarah realized she was no longer just a waitress. She was stepping into a role that demanded bravery and grit, even amidst the daunting challenges ahead. As Mark absorbed her proposition, the balance of power felt less certain, the potential for change crackling like energy before a storm. Would he view her suggestion as a breakthrough or a threat? As the tension hung palpably in the air, Sarah awaited his judgment, her mind racing with possibilities. What would the next chapter of her journey entail? Would their efforts to reshape the narrative of the diner find fertile ground, or would it be suffocated before it could even take flight? The only certainty was that everything hung in precarious balance, waiting for that fateful decision. Mark's silence stretched on, nearly uncomfortable in its weight. Behind his steely facade, Sarah sensed a battle of thoughts, a maelstrom of doubt and contemplation. She swallowed hard, the stakes felt higher than ever. This wasn't just about a proposal anymore, it was about her place in this world and her capacity to influence it. All right, he finally said, extracting her from the depths of her mind. Let us explore this brainstorming session. A rush of adrenaline surged through Sarah. She had anticipated pushback, perhaps even outright dismissal. Instead, he had opened a door. But as she nodded in agreement, a flicker of fear shot through her. What would that entail? What if they crossed the line from constructive suggestions to outright defiance? In the ensuing days, Sarah stood at a crossroads, each interaction tinged with urgency. She began reaching out to her colleagues, gauging their thoughts, building a coalition of ideas and shared ambitions. Encouraged by their enthusiasm, she scheduled the session, countless thoughts swirling in her mind. The prospect of presenting her insights carried its own dread, an echoing fear of failure gnawing at her confidence. Are you sure about this? Jay, one of her co-workers, asked one afternoon as they wiped down tables. If it goes south, Mark 1T be forgiving. I have to be sure, Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. This is our chance to change things. But with every confident word, her insides churned with trepidation. What if they revealed their vulnerabilities? What if instead of providing a voice, she would just amplify dissent? Still, a flicker of hope intertwined with her fear. Could their combined voices steer the diner toward an innovative future? When the day of the session arrived, anticipation mingled with anxiety in the break room. The employees filtered in, the energy electric yet uncertain. Sarah set up the table, her hands trembling slightly. She glanced at Mark, who stood outside the doorway, arms crossed, his presence both intimidating and oddly encouraging. Welcome, everyone, she started, her voice emerging more confident than she felt. Today, we're here to share our thoughts on enhancing the customer experience. Let us be honest about what we face every day on the floor and brainstorm real, tangible solutions. Her words hung in the air, and the room filled with murmurs of agreement and cautious optimism. Slowly, hands began to rise, ideas flowed like a river unleashed. They talked about creating thematic nights, elevating the menu, enhancing service with genuine engagement, a tapestry of aspirations spinning a vivid picture of possibility, but amidst the enthusiasm, Mark's presence remained a shadow. Sarah could see his expression shift from skepticism to contemplation, his rigid posture loosening, but doubt still danced in his eyes. As the session progressed, an unexpected thought struck her: what if we created a feedback loop with customers? One where they share their experiences, and we actively respond. The room buzzed with approval. She felt a surge of power. This was what she had envisioned, a collaborative effort, each voice a note in a symphony of change, yet, amidst the flurry of ideas, a nagging worry crept back in. What if her boldness backfired? Would her colleagues support her if Mark ultimately dismissed their contributions? Would she lose not just this moment, but also the respect she had fought so hard to build? Finally, as discussions began to wind down, Sarah approached Mark. He looked contemplative, and she searched his face for validation, or judgment. Was that what you expected? She asked, attempting to gauge his response. His eyes met hers, unwavering and unreadable. You've positioned yourself as a leader, Sarah, he replied, a hint of respect underlying his tone. But know this: leadership comes with consequences. The weight of his words landed heavily on her heart. She felt a tremor of apprehension, but also determination. What did this mean for her, moving forward? As she looked around at her team, a shared resolve simmered in the air. They had stepped into uncharted territory, and she was at the helm. But the enormous question loomed: would Mark accept their efforts as valuable, or would he see it as a threat? The moment was pivotal, and Sarah knew the journey was just beginning. She could feel the shifting sands beneath her feet, ready to reshape both her career and her identity. What would it take to navigate this precarious path, and what revelations lay ahead? With each passing day at the diner, Sarah felt the layers of her transformation peel away, the doubts and fears that had shackled her for years. The brainstorming session had opened a gateway, surfacing her latent leadership skills and ushering in a palpable sense of possibility. As she embraced her role as a catalyst for change, she began to feel the weight of her responsibilities, not just to herself, but to her colleagues, who were starting to mirror her awakening. Mark's acceptance of their ideas lingered in the air like a question waiting to be answered. The subsequent days spent navigating through feedback loops and newfound collaborations felt electric, yet the undercurrents of his authority had not dissipated. Every encounter with him became an exercise in measuring the delicate balance between his established expectations and the burgeoning voice of the employees, including her own. One morning, she noticed Mark sitting with an air of quiet contemplation at the booth he often occupied. The weight of the decision she had been formulating hovered above her like a guiding force. She approached him, steeling herself. "Mark, can we talk?" Sarah asked, earning a raised eyebrow from the once intimidating figure. She felt emboldened. This was not merely a conversation about logistics. This was about revolutionizing the diner culture to truly reflect the community it served. "Sure," he replied, with a hint of wariness in his tone, a shift from the previous dismissiveness. With clarity that surprised even her, she spoke passionately about the value in creating a more inclusive environment, where everyone's voice was valued. She didn't merely convey their ideas, she distilled the essence of their collective mission into compelling narratives, making it clear how the diner's future could thrive through this communal vision. To her astonishment, Mark listened, genuinely engaged as she recounted stories from the customers, the regulars they had grown to know and serve, whose experiences could elevate the diner into something remarkable. "I see potential, Sarah," he eventually admitted, and the admission sent a ripple of warmth through her. She felt seen, truly seen by the man who had embodied the barrier she once thought insurmountable. "But this kind of change takes a lot of commitment." She nodded, fully aware that commitment often came at a cost. "I understand that, Mark. We're willing to bear the weight, but it requires you to trust us. We're not merely here to serve, we want to be part of the heart of this place." For the first time, she noticed a flicker of respect in his eyes, softening the once sharp lines of judgment. "Then let us make it happen," he said, his voice carrying a newfound gravity. "If you believe in the direction, then I'll support it on one condition: we keep the quality intact." A rush of elation surged through Sarah. This moment was pivotal, the power dynamic was not just shifting, it was transforming. She extended her hand, feeling the heat of shared ambition between them. "I won't let you down," she assured him, a promise threading between them. And in that moment, she embraced the truth she had sought since the day she spilled coffee on his shoes. She was capable of stirring change, not just for herself, but for the entire community connected through the diner's vibrant threads. Over the next few weeks, marked by gatherings and exchanges brimming with enthusiasm, Sarah witnessed her colleagues rally around a shared purpose. A sense of belonging thrived, fueling a new culture that blossomed not just from her words, but from the collective will of everyone involved. They hosted themed nights that celebrated the diverse stories of their customers, generated feedback channels that captured the pulse of those who frequented the diner, and even integrated elements that highlighted local farmers. The blossoming enthusiasm began to catch the attention of the local media, not a mere blip on the radar, but a full feature focusing on Maple Street Diner's transformation into a community hub, praised for elevating the diner experience and promoting camaraderie. Then came the day when the diner's success was recognized with a notable community award. Sarah stood wrapped in her colleagues' arms, each of them beaming with pride as they stepped forward to accept the praise, not just as a team, but as a movement. Her heart swelled. This was victory within reach. Conflict had morphed into collaboration, and the personal standing she once feared to claim had become an identity of competence, confidence, and community. Urban legends were born not just from tales of billionaires, but now from stories of ordinary waitresses like herself, capturing the imaginations of patrons far and wide. With shadows of doubt finally receding, Sarah embraced every shift with passion, transformed into a pillar not just of service, but of innovation. She woke each morning revitalized. It was not just about surviving, it was about thriving in ways she once deemed impossible. As she stood by the diner window one evening watching the sun dip below the horizon, satisfaction washed over her, a deep-seated fulfillment that resonated throughout her being. She had not only reclaimed her narrative, she had spiraled into a life where her voice wasn't merely heard but echoing powerfully, stirring change at every turn. She had proven that change indeed starts with a single voice, but it flourishes when that voice empowers others. And as she surveyed the bustling diner, filled with familiar faces and warm laughter, she smiled to herself, knowing this was merely the beginning of something extraordinary. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that explore deeper transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Comment your reactions and theories about this inspiring ending because your thoughts matter. Finally, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to be part of this journey.